Okay, let's just jump right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a surprisingly profound cartoon story all about vegetables. Yeah, I know what you might be thinking. A cartoon about vegetables? But stick with me here, because the source material we're looking at today, this really popular animated story about a winter vegetable kitchen, is actually a brilliant, deeply localized domestic drama. It perfectly illustrates the hidden, honestly exhausting physical labor of domestic life that just goes completely unnoticed most of the time. So today we're going to break down this narrative, look at the cultural expectations placed on individuals in the kitchen, and see how a simple craving for farm-fresh greens can spiral into a literal health crisis.
So, to get us started, picture this. What happens when a modern, totally veggie-averse bride marries into a family that is absolutely obsessed with farm-fresh winter greens? I mean, that's the core conflict of our story right there. It's a classic clash of two completely different worlds. On one side, we've got the convenience of modern urban living, and on the other, this unyielding, super traditional demand for culinary perfection no matter what the physical cost is. It's a fascinating dynamic, and we're going to map out exactly how this whole thing plays out. Section 1. A dislike for green veggies. Let's meet our main character, Nikita.
Is basically a collision of two different planets. On one hand, Nikita represents the modern urban generation. Her lifestyle is totally built around those 10-minute online grocery delivery apps. She prefers quick, easy-to-assemble meals like sandwiches. She really values her time and relies heavily on technology to just make life frictionless. But her soon-to-be in-laws lifestyle is the exact polar opposite. They harvest directly from their family field. They demand elaborate, multi-dish, traditional meals featuring 3 or 4 different types of fresh greens at a single sitting. It is a collision course of epic proportions. To really put Nikita's mindset into perspective, she actually says it best herself. It's better to bring a 10-rupee bundle of coriander and green chilies to quickly grind into chutney than to deal with the long process of washing, peeling, and cooking. She isn't just being lazy here. She is highly aware of the massive amount of hidden labor involved in traditional cooking. The endless washing of muddy leaves, the chopping, the slow cooking. She absolutely dreads it. She sees it as a huge, unnecessary time sink when much simpler alternatives exist. Moving on to Section 2, the veggie-obsessed in-laws. The crucial point comes straight from her new mother-in-law, who basically lays down the law. Nobody in our family likes the taste of stale vegetables. We don't cook or eat them. I bring fresh green vegetables for every single meal. Notice that phrasing, every single meal. There is zero compromise here. The family has cultivated this hypersensitive palate. They equate love, care, and quality of life with the absolute freshest ingredients, but they completely ignore the human cost required to maintain that extreme standard.
And wow, that human cost is devastating. Because they demand absolute freshness, storing things in the fridge is essentially banned. You can't buy in bulk. You can't meal prep for the week. Instead, Nikita is expected to walk 2 kilometers to the family field every single morning. And remember, the story makes it super clear this is the dead of winter. We are talking about freezing winds, thick fog, ice-covered fields. This isn't just cooking anymore, right? This is intense daily physical labor disguised as a standard domestic chore.
Which brings us to Section 3, kitchen chores and winter chills. The tension really starts building here. This part brilliantly illustrates that invisible labor stack we were talking about earlier. It's not just making dinner. Step 1, she has to do that 2-kilometer freezing trek to harvest the produce. Step 2, she has to wash off layers of thick field mud using ice-cold water because there's no hot water tap in this traditional setup. Her hands are literally freezing. Step 3, she's expected to cook complex dishes like sarsen kasag and makiki roti. Not on a nice modern gas stove, but on an outdoor clay chula, a traditional stove, while the freezing winter wind and dew are just falling on her. The sheer amount of caloric energy and physical stamina required just to produce one meal is staggering. But what makes it so much worse is the family dynamic. Her sister-in-law, Rachna, casually tells her, "I will make the rotis, you make the vegetables." Sounds like a great example of teamwork, right? Well, actually, scratch that. The sister-in-law deliberately chooses the dry, relatively warm task of rolling dough right near the fire, strategically dumping the agonizing, freezing, wet work of washing and chopping icy vegetables squarely onto Nikita. It perfectly highlights the unfairness and the total lack of support within that household hierarchy. Driven totally to desperation, Nikita tries to rebel using the only tool she really knows, her smartphone. She attempts a secret delivery.
She uses an app to order fresh greens to the house, so she doesn't have to brave those freezing fields. It's a smart, modern solution for a very outdated problem, you know? Well, it fails completely. The family's palate is so rigidly attuned to their specific farm soil that they instantly detect the lack of farm taste. The older family members start complaining that the food tastes stale, which forces Nikita to confess and pushes her right back into that brutal outdoor routine.
Section 4. Illness and the breaking point.
The deterioration of her health here is terrifyingly rapid. By week 1, those 2-kilometer walks and the icy water leave her with swollen feet and completely numb hands. By week 3, her immune system is totally compromised and she catches a severe cold. But she's still expected to work. Finally, by week 4, she collapses in the kitchen. The doctor is called and the diagnosis is pneumonia. She literally worked herself to the point of fainting just to ensure the family had fresh winter vegetables on their plates.
Now, you would obviously expect some sympathy at this point, right? Instead, while she is bedridden, the family complains, "Today's daughters-in-law are so fragile. Just doing a little work in cold water and she takes to her bed." Man, that quote is a gut punch. It reveals a deep-seated lack of empathy and highlights the outdated, really toxic expectations placed on women. The older generation survived these harsh conditions, so they expect the new generation to suffer equally, completely ignoring the severe medical reality of her having actual pneumonia.
All right, Section 5, sharing the kitchen burden. Finally, a new system. It takes Nikita's husband, Nitin, stepping up to finally shatter the family's ignorance with this huge, powerful outburst. Do you have no humanity? She's bedridden because she went into the freezing fields daily just to feed you fresh vegetables. This is absolutely the moral turning point of the cartoon. Nitin forces his family to connect the dots between the delicious food they feel completely entitled to and the physical suffering of the woman providing it. He makes all that invisible labor visible. And this brings us to a wonderfully structured resolution. Once the family finally acknowledges the unfairness, they implement a super simple but highly effective system. The men, who were entirely absent from the domestic sphere before this, take over the physical labor of fetching the vegetables from the freezing field. The other women stop dodging the hard work and actually gather together to clean and cut the produce. And Nikita? She still cooks, but she does it with full assistance in a warm kitchen. By simply dividing the labor, a health-destroying routine transforms into a manageable, even bonding family activity. This cartoon story might technically be about winter vegetables, but it's really about how we value the people who sustain us. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Who bears the invisible labor for the meals in your home? And is it maybe time to share the burden? Think about the prep, the planning, the cleaning, the sheer effort that goes into the food on your table every day. It's a pretty powerful thought to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this changes how you view your next home-cooked meal.